Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Geraghty of National Review is back today, thanks to Alexander DeSanctis and David French for pinch hitting the last 3 days. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Want to let you know that we're sponsored today by ZipRecruiter. Right now, Three Martini Lunch listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ziprecruiter.com/martini. You should all know about ZipRecruiter by now, and if you don't, you'll learn a whole lot more about it in just a moment. So, as most folks know, since we've mentioned it before he left and while he was gone, Jim was out in Palm Springs, California at the Koch Summit, where folks get together and talk about ideas that they think could benefit a whole lot of people. For example, they were strong champions of the criminal justice reform legislation that passed late last year, and there's plenty of other ideas as well. Jim, I know you're thrilled to leave that horrible California weather behind and get back to the East Coast. How was the trip?
Yeah, by the way, I flew back through Chicago, which meant I was leaving Palm Springs, which was, about 70 degrees, very pleasant, no need for a jacket, down to the ice planet of Hoth. And when I mentioned that, I do believe that in some parts of the Midwest, the temperature outside was colder than what the Mars lander was recording at its spot on Mars. So this is the third year I've gone out to the Koch, technically it's called the Seminar Network. They got tired of being referred to as the Koch Network, even though that's what everybody kind of knows it as. I refer to it as the Koch Network in most of my reporting because otherwise people are like, what's the Seminar Network? Is that some college thing or something like that? But yeah, so this is the guys you know as the shadowy Koch brothers from all those attack ads who have Americans for Prosperity, the Libre Initiative, Concerned Veterans for America, and then this new group which is expanding rapidly called Stand Together, which is designed on building social capital. They only invite certain journalists to cover it, not all conservatives, in case you were wondering. Washington Post, AP, CNN, all those crowds. Fewer reporters than last year. I don't know if this means that fewer people wanted to go out there or they invited fewer folks. I could kind of sense, though, Greg, you can kind of tell that they, after being denounced as the shadowy Koch brothers all these years, they started, hey, let's invite reporters just so they can see what we do at our meetings and what we're all about. And for those, it's worth noting, the Koch network and the Koch brothers are not straight down the line traditional Republicans. They got along with a lot of folks in the Tea Party, really like the Scott Walkers of the world. Mike Lee out in Utah, who spoke at this year's meeting. They are small. They're libertarians generally, but when I say this, I usually say they're not capital L libertarians, meaning that I've never really heard them talk about gun rights at these things. They're not anti-gun rights. It just isn't one of their big issues. Don't hear anything about gay marriage, abortion, social issues like that. Low taxes, low regulation, expanding opportunity and entrepreneurship, things like that. A couple of political issues did come up in this, and they're strangely, weirdly optimistic that they're going to be able to get some sort of immigration deal done this year, either a small one that would include border security funding for the Dreamers. They're very big on the Dreamers, and probably the temporary protected status folks who had their protections rescinded by the Trump administration. And some think they could get a bigger deal. Some are full-on path to legalization. I didn't hear a lot of talk. I don't think at least the donors who were available for us to talk to were not pro path to citizenship, but they do want these folks to be able to live here, work, and not be afraid of getting deported. Also, further work on criminal justice reform and things like that. I generally try to describe those communitarian libertarians. I could kind of tell the other reporters who were there, I'm not going to name names, they all seem like nice guys and gals, but they generally, like when other reporters come to these meetings, it's basically like, okay, how much money are you going to spend on these year's elections? And not quite, if not quite, how evil are you? Who are you supporting? What are you going to be lobbying Congress on and stuff like that? And you could very much tell the Koch network did not want to emphasize that at this year's election. They said that they're not taking a stance in the 2020 presidential election. Greg, I don't know about you, I was struck by the number of people who wrote about that like it was a big deal. They weren't active in the 2016 presidential election. I don't think it's I'm revealing anything out of any off-the-record sessions when I say the Koch brothers do not like Donald Trump. They personally, the way he operates, the way he treats people is just the complete anathema to them and their values and their idea of how you should be treating people. They like the tax cuts. They like the rollback of regulations. They love the criminal justice reform that he signed into law. They're going to work with the administration, but they are not Trump supporters. And people shouldn't be surprised when they say, yeah, we're still the same position. The only time the Koch network supported somebody in a presidential election was 2012. They supported Romney against Obama, and well, we remember how that went. So the other thing which they're doing, which I think they spent a lot of time showcasing, and I got the feeling a lot of political reporters were kind of bored by this, Stand Together has on their website, they have this 115 different charities that do things to fight poverty. Some of it's job training, some of it's education and scholarships, some of it's shelters for battered women and things like that. Up for the rest of the year, if you donate up to $1,000, they will match it to any one of these 115 different charities. So, some people, here we go, window dressing. Here they are trying to, they throw some money around to improve their image. And no, Greg, I'm sure some listeners will agree, some won't. But if you're a conservative, if you want government to be small, if you believe there are a lot of problems the federal government has not done a good job of solving, well, then you want private charities to step into the gap. So to me, this is classic Burkean little platoons here. This is classic community-based groups trying to solve problems like homelessness and drug addiction and poverty in their communities. So I walked away with this saying, hey, attaboy, guys, put in links to it in the Morning Jolt if you want to hear more about it. I suspect, though, Greg, that some political reporters walked away from this year's winter meeting a little frustrated that the traditional story wasn't there for them.
Well, they're just going to have to get used to the real story now. So glad it was a good...
Oh, those darn charities. You can. It's the internet, guys. You can spare a little time and ink for that. So.
Well, we'll get to immigration in just a second, but I'm glad to know that they're continuing to promote entrepreneurship and raising living standards in local communities by encouraging job creation and that sort of thing. And while we look forward to additional jobs being created, there's always the importance of filling existing jobs. And you know what's not smart? Job boards that send you a mile-high stack of resumes to sort through. But you know what is smart? Going to ZipRecruiter.com/martini to hire the right person.
You see, unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter finds qualified candidates for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes to identify people with the right skills, education, and experience, and actively invites them to apply to your job, so you get qualified candidates fast. That's why ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the United States. This rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with more than 1,000 reviews.
And right now, 3 Martini Lunch listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/martini. If you love this show, show your support to it and ZipRecruiter by going to ZipRecruiter.com/MARTINI. That's ZipRecruiter.com/martini. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. Jim, I don't think Willie Brown used ZipRecruiter, but that's teasing. That's teasing our third martini. We'll get to that in just a moment. But on to our bad martini, and this is a Morning Jolt item. While you were gone, of course, as you know, President Trump reached a 3-week agreement with Congress to reopen the government and come together on some sort of funding for, he still insists on a wall, but border security. There's a bipartisan panel assembled, and basically we've got till about February 15th before we hit another government shutdown. And some folks are saying Trump caved. Others say, no, this is the art of the deal. It's the negotiation. He's got the Democrats on the ropes now and all sorts of other things. But as you point out today, quoting a story here, it looks like the Republicans on Capitol Hill do not have the stomach for another fight here. It says Republicans are in no mood to be dragged back into another partial closure in mid-February, the deadline to get a deal on spending for roughly a quarter of the government. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, modifying a well-known quote, told reporters Tuesday that, quote, there certainly would be no education in the third kick of the mule. I don't like shutdowns, he said. I don't think they work for anybody, and I hope that they would be avoided, McConnell said. More McConnell, I'm for whatever works, which means avoiding a shutdown and avoiding the president feeling that he should declare a national emergency, unquote. Senator John Thune, the number 2 Republican in the Senate, characterized a shutdown as, quote, a pox on all of our houses. And as you point out, Jim, this certainly does not suggest that the Democratic hand is weakened here at all. And so if you want the wall and you like the wall, you're going to be waiting a while.
Yeah, look, it's been very tough to figure out what the White House strategy has been in this fight over funding for the wall, heading, since the elections. You kind of knew that once the Democrats won 40 seats, and were going to take control over the House, that time was not on the administration's side. That the Democrats, because coming on January 3rd, they were going to have more members and not fewer members. That they all wait. Time was on their side. The more if they waited, they had more say over what the legislation would entail. Then Trump goes out and says, "I will take the mantle. I will take the blame." Which again, like if you're going to get into a blame game later on, greatly complicates things. There really seemed to be this idea of, okay, we start the government shutdown. It puts a squeeze on government workers. That part happened. And then at some point, House Democrats and Senate Democrats were going to fold, that they were going to say, okay, we're going to fund the wall, even though Nancy Pelosi had declared it an immorality. There were some indicators that some purple state swing district Democrats were starting to get nervous about this, but really not a lot of sign that they were ready to make a giant concession. Trump did go out and say that he was going to offer a temporary extension to the Dreamers and a temporary extension to those TPS folks, but really didn't get any serious response from the Democrats. And then you started seeing the problems with air traffic control, and it became clear, okay, let's get this three-week extension. In light of Senate Republicans saying, we have no interest in doing this again, if you're the Democrats, what interest do you have to make a concession? This is a big, powerful, symbolic issue for both sides. A lot of people speculate that if there is not a significant amount of border security construction going on by 2020, that Trump will have a much tougher time getting reelected. His base will be able to, can reasonably conclude that he has disappointed them. The thing is, though, is that if Senate Democrats are saying, look, if 3 weeks go by and we don't have a deal, we will vote for additional funding, for the government without wall funding. What leverage does the White House have? I guess they could say we'll veto it and make you guys get a veto-proof majority. But my suspicion is that would happen again. And oh, by the way, my other sneaking suspicion is that if we do come to a government shutdown again, air traffic control problems would kick in much faster than the 4 to 5 week window that we saw. Because the air traffic controllers, oh, wait a minute, we have the veto. We're the ones who can decide what time the government shutdown ends, because when we announce that we have to slow down the flights because we don't have enough manpower, that's when everybody freaks out and says, okay, let's reach a deal. So I don't see how this 3 week span comes to any type of a deal that's pleasing to the administration, because the Senate Republicans have already said, look, we don't think this is worth shutting down the government over, and we'll vote for a government funding bill. So I'm curious as to what the White House does next now that they realize they don't have any real way to pressure anybody else to reach this deal.
That's a good point. And you're right that a lot of people thought that Trump made the deal to distract from the Stone indictment. No, it was because three major East Coast airports were about to wreak havoc on the entire system, LaGuardia, Philly, and Newark, if in fact something didn't change quickly. So they had the Trump card, no pun intended there. So how do you expect Trump to play this? That basically I'm the only one standing up for this, so you got to stick with me. Even my Republican friends on Capitol Hill aren't willing to do what I promised, and that sort of thing. What do you think his reaction is going to be if he can't get it?
You're hearing more grumbling about that emergency funding plan, the idea that Trump could declare this is a national emergency and thus I can divert funds to start building the border security. Again, most people think that would get challenged in court immediately, and then that ties it up in the court for several years. So not good. Now, the great irony is that if you really want to get this done, maybe the best option is something like the bigger deal that they were touting at the Koch Network meeting this year. Give the Democrats what they want on Dreamers and TPS, which would not make the Stephen Millers of the world happy, would not make the Ann Coulters of the world happy. But you might get Democrats on board for that, giving them permanent protections, and then you get a decent amount of wall funding. I guess the question really is, and then you throw in E-Verify or something like that. What do Democrats want? Well, they want TPS, they want DACA, and they want some sort of path to legalization at least, and probably citizenship. Now, obviously, you give them path to citizenship, then it would be seen as a full-scale surrender. But if you're Trump, you figure out, all right, how much funding can I get for you guys for this step? How much funding can I get you guys for that step? And you figure out how many billions in border security money do you need to say, okay, now I've come close enough to keeping my promise to keep my base voters happy.
All right, Jim, let's move to our crazy martini now, and to the pages of the Washington Post opinion section we go. Columnist Monica Hess writing, quote, "the unique harm we cause when we dissect a powerful woman's love life." So, as we've seen in the past week, and actually more than that now, the media really likes Kamala Harris. They covered her announcement live. She got a solo town hall on CNN. She's just getting glowing coverage all over the place. I don't remember seeing that for Julian Castro or Kirsten Gillibrand or any of these other people hopping into the race. We'll see if that happens. But one of the things that has come to light, you mentioned it in your 20 things about Kamala Harris, and other people have mentioned it since, is that back in the 90s, she dated San Francisco political bigwig Willie Brown. Eventually, he became the mayor, and he appointed her to a couple of important commissions. And, oh, by the way, he was married while all that was happening. So here's what Monica Hess writes. As of this week, women are running for president, multiple women, and lo, the country has been awarded the chance for a do-over. This time we swear we won't order them to smile more if they really want our votes. This time we'll stop using phrases like likable enough when what we really mean is too many ovaries. Our collective consciousness has been raised, and so we'll begin by excavating one of the candidates' decades-old love life. And her launching point for this is the fact that Willie Brown wrote a very short column in the San Francisco papers saying, yeah, we dated, yeah, I appointed her to these things, so what? Back to Monica Hess now, it says the two things were separate according to Brown. One, they dated. Two, he helped her career. The latter didn't have anything to do with the former. Whether you believe that probably depends on whether you believe one can separate someone's professional qualifications from their dinner companionship. Later on, she mentions how folks like Bill Clinton and Anthony Weiner certainly got a lot of attention for their habits, let's just say. It's not, she says, that we don't talk about the sexual predilections of male candidates, but we do talk about them in a different way. We talk about men abusing power. We talk about women not even deserving power. The distinction matters because the conversation isn't really about sex. It's about legitimacy. It's about who we think has earned the right to be successful and what criteria we'll invent and who will apply it to. And later on towards the end, it says, he wasn't her boss. The relationship was consensual. Dating a technically still married man, 30 years one senior, might not be the relationship that most of us would make. But it's understandable that smart government officials in San Francisco's political scene would end up socializing with each other. Was Harris supposed to date only morons with whom she had nothing in common? So, Jim, the spin machine is up and running and humming at full speed here.
Yeah. Wow. First of all, the headline says dissecting her love life. Greg, have you encountered any coverage of Kamala Harris that has any issue with any of her other relationships?
Nope.
Most people couldn't tell you the name of her husband, right? Most people don't care. You know, she could date dozens of guys, only know two guys in her whole. That's her life. Her life. By and large, people don't care about this. If Willie Brown had been a powerful CEO, I'm not so sure this would have been nearly the issue. And what's worth noting is, look, 1994, he named her as his appointee to the state's Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. Okay, that job pays $97,000 a year. Remember, this is $1994, not today dollars. So that's, a pretty nice chunk of change. But 6 months later, she also gets onto the California Medical Assistance Commission. This is while the relationship is going on. He's married the entire time. Look, we live in the Trump era, right? It's probably safe to say we're not surprised about politicians committing adultery. We're not surprised by, you run for office. There's an excellent chance you're going to be a narcissist. There's an excellent chance you're going to have a belief that the rules don't apply to you. We should, that part I'll leave to other people to make the arguments about. But at the heart of it is cronyism, right? At the heart of it is this idea of she got onto these boards and these commissions because of her special relationship with Willie Brown. And that what I think is a much fairer area there. And for that person, I guess the argument of this Post columnist is, well, this is implying she didn't earn it. Well, look, Kamala Harris has been a DA for a very long time. She went on to be state attorney general. I don't think anyone is saying Kamala Harris is stupid. Certainly she's, capable in law, although I did point out that their prosecution rates in San Francisco were not quite as good as you might have expected once you weed out the ones where there are plea bargains and things like that. But look, no one's saying Kamala Harris is stupid. What they're saying here is that, look, because of her connection to Willie Brown, she had opportunities that no one else got. right? If they had been best friends and not in a sexual relationship, the issue of cronyism would still be there. I don't think anyone is saying there was an explicit quid pro quo, but we see this sort of thing all the time in politics, and we don't like it because this says that the country is not really a meritocracy. You could argue it's a form of nepotism. You could argue it is because of my personal connection to this person. I'm going to put them in this role, which is, fairly significantly financially compensated and has a certain amount of power. And this person is getting this opportunity because of the way I know them, as opposed to all other potential candidates for the job. And I think people have good reason to object to that. Now, is this the most important issue in Kamala Harris's career? Probably not. Probably is that she's, wants the Green New Deal, doesn't want to talk about the banning of the cars, the cutting the military budget in half, the banning of private ownership of cars, and the banning of the internal combustion engine. The fact that she, up until this morning, wanted to ban insurance companies. Like there's a lot of material here, but I don't think it's the least bit surprising that people look at this and don't feel good about Kamala Harris and basically feel like she was benefiting because of her special relationship with Willie Brown.
I think that's right. And in the Me Too era, it's an interesting twist on the story as well. I think that adds some greater interest to it.
I mean, people look back on the Monica Lewinsky scandal. People have argued whether you should call it the Lewinsky scandal or the Bill Clinton scandal. But the observing that even though everything was consensual, look, he's the president of the United States. She's an unpaid White House intern who wanted to get a paid gig, right? So this is a circumstance in which even if every feeling they were feeling for each other was genuine, by the way, let's not forget the fact that at one point Bill Clinton said to Monica Lewinsky, I have nothing to live for but my work. Can't help, even aside from everything of Hillary Clinton, that's a horrible thing to say. And, what about your daughter, sir? But anyway, so you have this circumstance in which you have just such a fundamental imbalance in power between the two of them. You kind of raise the question of just how mutually beneficial and consensual can that relationship be? Is it inherently an abuse of power when you can make somebody's career or break somebody's career? And obviously that you're being in your good graces is and happy with the relationship could end up having that stuff. Look, there's an old saying, don't fish off the company pier, so to speak. Quills and company inkwells and things like that. You mix personal relationships with the workplace, things can get complicated pretty fast. In this particular circumstance, this would seem like. Here's the thing: we don't know if there was anybody else who really wanted to get that job on the State Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. We don't know if there was somebody else who really wanted to be on the California Medical Assistance Commission. But we know that if you want a job and somebody else wants the job and your rival happens to be in a sexual relationship with the person making the selection, you think that system stinks, and you've got good reason to think that system stinks. Because the whole point is we don't make somebody Speaker of the California Assembly so that they can reward their mistresses. That's what it comes down to. And I think Kamala Harris is at some point probably going to get some tough questions about that. And she's going to scream sexism, and you're going to see a lot of reactions like the objections raised by this Washington Post columnist. But, it is very hard to dispute that these connections with Willie Brown played a big role in the beginning of Kamala Harris's career, and she's going to face some very difficult questions about that.
No shortage of headlines while you were gone, Jim, but good to have you back, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
Looking forward to it, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget to visit our friends over at ZipRecruiter. You can try it for free. ZipRecruiter.com/martini. And tune in again Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.